I was 32 years old when my father said it out loud, like it was a compliment. "You've always been the strong one." "Evelyn," he said across the dinner table, "you don't really need help." The words landed softly. They always did. That was the problem. Before I could respond, my mother nodded in agreement. "Your sister needs us more right now. You understand that, don't you?" I did understand. I always had. This is a story created by the author of the Revenge Amber channel for educational and inspirational purposes, and it does not portray any specific real-life individual. Growing up in Naperville, Illinois, I learned early what it meant to be the child who didn't need anything. Not because I had more, but because I asked for less. When I did well in school, my parents said, "Of course you did." When my sister Lila struggled, they said, "She's sensitive. She needs encouragement." At family dinners, my achievements were footnotes. Lila's moods were headlines. "You didn't tell us you got another scholarship," my mother once said, sounding mildly offended. "I did," I replied. "Last week." She blinked, then smiled politely. "Oh, that's nice, honey." Then she turned to Lila. "Did you eat today?" That was the rhythm of our house. I learned it so well that by the time I left for college, I had stopped expecting anything else. Years later, sitting at that same table, my father leaned back in his chair and smiled the way he always did when he thought he was being reasonable. "You've done well for yourself," he said. "Good job, good career, your own place. You're fine. Fine." The word followed me everywhere. "I worked for that," I said quietly. "We know," he replied, already waving it off. But Lila's still figuring things out. My sister stared at her plate. She didn't look up. She never did when the conversation tilted like this. My mother reached for my hand. "Families support each other," she said softly. "You've always understood that better than anyone." I pulled my hand back, gently. Not because I was angry, because I was tired. For years, I thought being understanding was a virtue. I thought strength meant silence. I thought love meant shrinking myself so other people could breathe easier. It took me a long time to realize that being the daughter who didn't need anything was a role, not a truth. A role that made it very easy for everyone else to take. That night, after dinner, I sat alone in my car before driving home. I stared at the dashboard, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My phone buzzed with a message from Lila. "Mom says you get it," she wrote. "Thanks for being cool about everything." I didn't reply. If you're listening to this and something about it feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me. This isn't a story about money. It's about what happens when you stop agreeing to disappear. I started the engine and drove away, already sensing that the version of me my family depended on was beginning to change even if they hadn't noticed yet. I learned early that success didn't make noise in our house unless it belonged to Lila. When I brought home my acceptance letter to the summer program at Columbia University Extension, my father skimmed it once and slid it back across the table. "That's impressive," he said, already reaching for his coffee. "When does Lila's recital start tonight?" "It's the same weekend I leave," I said. My mother frowned, not at the conflict, but at the inconvenience. "Well, your sister has been nervous all week. You'll be fine on your own." I nodded. I always nodded. At school, teachers told me I was driven. Friends told me I was lucky. At home, my accomplishments were treated like background noise, something steady and expected, like a clock ticking in another room. When I graduated near the top of my class, my mother hugged me and said, "We're proud of you," the way people say they're glad the weather held. Then she added, "Lila barely passed math this semester. She's been so stressed." That night, we ordered takeout to celebrate, not my graduation, Lila's relief. During my final year of college, I worked 2 part-time jobs while finishing my thesis. I came home late, exhausted, to find my parents in the living room with Lila. She cried for an hour. My father told me as I set my bag down, We can't let her feel like a failure. I didn't feel great either, I said. It slipped out before I could stop it. My mother looked surprised, then concerned, the way she did when a stranger interrupted her. You're different. Evelyn, you've always been resilient. Resilient. Another word that followed me. The day I left for that summer program, I asked if they could drive me to the airport. My father checked his calendar. That's the night of Lila's performance. He said, "Can you get a ride?" I did. A friend's father took me, helped me load my suitcase, and wished me luck like it mattered. At the airport, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Break a leg. We're proud of you. I stared at the message longer than I should have. By the time I finished college, I stopped sharing news unless I was asked. I stopped expecting applause. I learned how to clap for myself quietly, where no one could take it away. Therapy was the first place I said it out loud. I feel invisible, I told the counselor. She didn't argue. She just nodded and said, "That makes sense." It was the first time anyone had. By the time I built my life on my own terms, I had already learned the lesson my family never meant to teach me. Achievement doesn't protect you when you were never meant to be seen. By the time I bought my townhouse in Oak Park, my parents had stopped worrying about me entirely. You landed on your feet. My father said when I told them, "We always knew you would." It wasn't praise. It was permission to be forgotten. I invited them over once, thinking maybe seeing my life would change something. My mother walked through the living room, nodded at the furniture, and said, "It's nice. Practical." Then she asked, "Is Lila still having trouble sleeping?" "She hasn't mentioned it." I said, "Well, she wouldn't tell you." My father replied, "She needs us." That word again. Needs. At work. People asked how I managed everything on my own. I smiled and said I liked being independent. It was easier than explaining that independence had never been a choice. It had been assigned. When I visited my parents' house, I noticed the pattern more clearly. Groceries appeared in the fridge for Lila. Bills were paid without discussion. Plans were rearranged around her moods. "You're lucky," my mother told me once as she handed Lila a stack of mail. "You don't have to worry about these things." "I worry," I said. She laughed lightly. "You worry about big picture stuff. Your sister worries about surviving." I realized then that my success had become a justification. Because I was standing, they felt free to lean harder on me emotionally, even as they gave everything else to her. One afternoon, my father called and said, "We might need your help soon," with what I asked, just being understanding. He replied, "You're good at that." The call ended, and I sat in silence, the familiar pressure settling in my chest. Being understanding had never cost them anything. It had cost me years. I thought independence meant safety. I thought it meant distance from old patterns. But I was still playing the same role, just from farther away. The difference was that now I could see it, and once you see it, you can't pretend not to. The call came on a Tuesday morning, right in the middle of a work meeting. Your grandfather passed peacefully. My aunt said when I stepped into the hallway, "We're meeting with the attorney on Friday." I sat through the rest of the meeting on autopilot, nodding when expected, speaking when necessary. My grandfather Thomas had always been steady in my life, quietly encouraging, never demanding. Losing him felt like losing the one person who never needed me to prove anything. The law office in downtown Chicago was smaller than I expected. The attorney, Mr. Klein, spoke calmly, efficiently, as if reading grocery items instead of a man's final wishes. "The estate is to be divided equally among the grandchildren," he said. "Each share amounts to approximately $410,000. I felt my breath catch. Not because of the number, but because of the word equally. My mother stiffened beside me. My father's jaw tightened. "That can't be right," my father said. "Evelyn is doing fine. Lila is still struggling. Mr. Klein glanced up, polite but unmoved. The will is very clear. My mother turned to me, her voice low. Did you know about this, No? I said honestly, I didn't expect anything. That part was true. My sister Lila stared at the floor, twisting her hands. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look relieved either. After the meeting, my father pulled me aside in the hallway. We'll talk about this at home, he said. Not a request, a decision. At dinner that night, the plates barely touched the table before he started. This isn't about fairness, he said. It's about doing the right thing. The right thing for who I asked. My mother sighed, already tired of the conversation. You know your sister needs more support. I didn't ask Grandpa for this, I said. He made his choice, and choices can be adjusted, my father replied, especially when circumstances change. Lila finally spoke, her voice small. I didn't ask for this either. I know, I said, meeting her eyes. My father leaned forward. You don't need this money, Evelyn. You've proven that. The words landed harder than he realized. That night, alone in my townhouse, I replayed the meeting over and over. Not the number, the equality. For the first time in my life, someone had looked at me and decided I deserved the same. I slept poorly, knowing that the quiet validation I felt was temporary. In my family, anything that looked like balance was always corrected. My father waited until dessert to bring it up, as if sugar might soften the blow. We've been thinking, he said, folding his napkin with care, about the inheritance. My mother nodded beside him. This doesn't have to be complicated. I set my fork down. It already is. He didn't like that. I could tell by the way his mouth tightened. Your grandfather didn't know the full situation. He knew us, I said. He knew all of us. He didn't know how hard things have been for Lila. My mother said quickly, You do. Lila stared at the table. Her hands were clenched in her lap. I know how hard things have been for me too, I said. My father waved that away. You've always managed. That doesn't mean I didn't need help. He leaned back, studying me. This isn't about need. It's about responsibility. My mother reached for my arm again. Families support each other. You've always believed that. I believed it when it went both ways, I said. The room went quiet. My father cleared his throat. We'd like you to sign something. Just a temporary agreement. I looked at him. What kind of agreement? A simple arrangement, he said. The funds would be redirected to help your sister get on her feet. And me. You don't need help, he replied without hesitation. The certainty in his voice made something crack inside me. I'm not signing anything, I said. My mother's expression shifted first. Evelyn, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not the one making it hard. My father's tone sharpened. Think carefully. Choices have consequences. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you where your priorities should be. Lila finally spoke, barely audible. Mom said you'd understand. I turned to her. Do you think this is fair? She hesitated. I think you'll be okay. My father nodded. See, even your sister knows. I didn't ask to be okay. I said, I asked to be treated the same. That's not how families work. My mother said, not real ones. My father stood. If you refuse to do the right thing, don't expect us to support you when this causes problems. What problems? I asked. The kind that happen when someone puts money before family. I felt my heart pounding. Steady and loud. You're the ones asking me to give it up. We're asking you to prove who you are, he said. I stood too. I know who I am. My father's voice dropped. Then prove it. I left without another word. In the car, my hands shook so badly I had to sit there until they stopped. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Please think about what you're doing. This doesn't have to tear us apart. I didn't respond. For the first time, I understood that my compliance had been the glue holding everything together, and that the moment I stopped offering it, the structure they depended on began to strain. The email arrived 3 days later. It wasn't angry. That was what made it worse. Evelyn, my father wrote, as executor, I need to ensure the estate is handled responsibly. Given the current family situation, I believe it's best if the funds are temporarily held until we reach an agreement. I read it twice, then a third time. Temporarily held meant delayed. Agreement meant surrender. I called him immediately. You don't get to do that. I said the moment he answered. I do. He replied calmly. That's my role. Your role isn't to punish me. I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting the family. You're protecting Lila. There was a pause. She needs it. So do I. I said, you just don't like admitting that. My mother picked up on the other line. We're trying to keep this civil. This isn't civil, I said. This is control. Lower your voice, my father snapped. You're being emotional. That word again. Emotional. As if I hadn't spent my entire life proving how controlled I could be. You're delaying the distribution to force me to comply. I said, that's not what Grandpa wanted. You don't know what he wanted, my father replied. He trusted me to handle this. He trusted you to follow his instructions. Silence. Then my father said, if you refuse to cooperate, don't expect to be welcome here. Something in my chest gave way. Not loudly. Quietly. After the call, I sat in my car in the parking lot outside my office. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. My breath came shallow, uneven. I couldn't make it stop. A text came through from Lila. Mom says this would be easier if you didn't fight it. She wrote, you've always been stronger. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Being strong had never meant being safe. It meant being used as proof that everything was fine. I typed back slowly. I'm not fighting. I'm refusing to disappear. She didn't reply. That night, my father called again. You're forcing my hand, he said. If this goes further, there will be consequences. Like what? Like being written out. Like losing your place in this family. I felt strangely calm. I've never had a place. I said, I just filled the gaps. He hung up. I sat on the floor of my living room, my back against the couch, trying to steady my breathing. The panic came in waves, sharp and unexpected, like my body had finally decided to speak after years of silence. When I could think clearly again, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in years. Helen Carter. My grandmother answered on the second ring. Evelyn, she said. You sound like something's wrong. I closed my eyes. Grandma, I said. I think Dad is trying to change Grandpa's will. There was a pause. Then her voice hardened in a way I had never heard before. He promised me he wouldn't. She said, and now we're going to talk. My grandmother asked me to come see her the next morning. When I arrived, she didn't offer tea or small talk. She closed the door behind me and said, sit. I did. Your father tried this once before. She said, years ago. My stomach dropped. Tried what? To change the will. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. He came to your grandfather and said it wasn't fair that everything would be divided equally. He said Lila needed protection, that you would be fine without it. I swallowed. What did Grandpa say? He told him no, she said, very clearly. She opened a folder on the table and slid it toward me. Inside were copies of legal documents, neatly organized, dated years before my grandfather passed. He said if anyone challenged the distribution or tried to interfere, they would lose their authority entirely. She continued. He added a clause removing the executor if they acted against the terms of the will. I stared at the papers. He planned for this. Yes, she said, because he knew his son. The weight of it pressed down on me all at once. Not just relief, but grief. My grandfather had seen everything I thought I had imagined. Why didn't he tell me? I asked quietly. He didn't want to burden you, she said. He believed you'd already carried enough. She picked up the phone and dialed a number I didn't recognize. This is Helen Carter, she said when the line connected. I need to speak to the estate attorney. She put the call on speaker. The attorney introduced himself calmly, professionally. She explained what had happened without emotion. That confirms my concerns, he said. If Richard delayed distribution or attempted to redirect funds, he violated his duties. Then remove him, my grandmother said. There was a pause. I'll begin the process immediately. My phone buzzed as if on cue. A call from my father. I didn't answer. He's going to be furious. I said. He should have thought about that. She replied. Later that afternoon, my father showed up at her door unannounced. He didn't knock. He never did. You went behind my back. He said the moment he saw me. You went behind your father's, my grandmother said sharply. This was supposed to be handled privately. He snapped. You lost that privilege. She said, the moment you tried to manipulate the will. He turned to me. I can't believe you did this. I stood. My voice surprised me with how steady it was. I didn't do anything. I told the truth. You embarrassed me, he said. You threatened me. I replied. You tried to take something that wasn't yours to give. My mother arrived shortly after, her eyes red, her voice trembling. Why are you tearing the family apart? I didn't tear anything. I said. I stopped holding it together. The attorney called that evening. Richard Carter is officially removed as executor. He said, the estate will proceed as written. My father didn't speak. He just stared at me, something unreadable in his eyes. For the first time in my life, the power in the room had shifted, not because I raised my voice, not because I demanded anything, but because the truth had finally caught up with them. The family gathering was supposed to be quiet. It was Easter Sunday, hosted at my aunt's house, and I almost didn't go. After everything that had happened, the idea of polite smiles and forced conversation felt unbearable, but my grandmother insisted they should hear it. She said, not your version, the truth. I arrived early. Lila was already there, sitting alone on the couch, her shoulders tight. They didn't tell me they were coming, she said before I could speak. I know, I replied. They arrived anyway. My father walked in first, jaw set, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. My mother followed, already crying. I can't believe you'd do this, my father said loudly enough for everyone to hear. After everything we've done for you. Conversations stopped. Forks froze mid-air. My aunt stepped forward. Richard, this isn't the place. This is exactly the place, he snapped, pointing at me. She took from her own sister. She turned our mother against us. I felt every eye on me. My chest tightened, but I didn't speak. My grandmother did. That's enough, she said, standing slowly. You don't get to rewrite this story anymore. My father laughed bitterly. So now you're choosing her too. I'm choosing the truth, she replied. Something you abandoned a long time ago. The estate attorney, whom my grandmother had invited quietly, cleared his throat. My name is Daniel Harris, he said. I represent the Carter estate. My father stiffened. Why is he here? Because you forced this into the open, my grandmother said. The attorney spoke calmly. Richard Carter was removed as executor after attempting to delay and redirect inheritance funds. The will stands as written. My mother gasped. That's not fair. It's lawful, he replied. My father turned to me, his voice shaking with rage. You could have stopped this. I tried. I said. You didn't listen. Lila stood then, surprising all of us. You didn't listen to me either, she said, her voice trembling but firm. You told me she'd be fine. You never asked if I wanted this. My mother reached for her. Honey. No. Lila said. I'm tired of being the reason you hurt her. Silence fell, thick and heavy. My father looked around the room, at his siblings, his mother, his daughters. The authority he'd carried so easily had nowhere left to rest. We're leaving, he said finally. As they walked out, no one stopped them. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My grandmother squeezed my hand. You didn't embarrass them, she said quietly. They did that themselves. Across the room, Lila met my eyes. For the first time, there was no apology in her expression, just understanding. The fallout wasn't loud after that. It was quiet and permanent. The silence afterward was different from the ones before. My parents didn't call, not to argue, not to explain. The space they left behind felt deliberate, like a door closed carefully instead of slammed. My mother sent one message a week later. I'm starting therapy. She wrote, I don't know how to fix this, but I see now that I helped break it. I read it twice. I didn't reply right away. My father sent nothing. Lila came over one evening, standing awkwardly in my doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside my life yet. I enrolled in classes, she said. Community college. I'm paying for it myself. That's a big step, I said. She nodded. Watching you stop backing down made me realize how much I've been hiding. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us heavy but honest. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for letting them put this on you. I know, I said, and I meant it. When the inheritance finally came through, I paid off the last of my student loans first. The rest went where it should have gone all along into stability, therapy, and something I'd never allowed myself before choice. At dinner with my grandmother one night, she raised her glass and said, Your grandfather would be proud. I think he already was, I replied. A few weeks later, my mother asked to meet. We sat across from each other at a small cafe. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just want to do better. Then do better, I said. Without asking me to disappear again, she nodded, tears in her eyes. I walked away from that meeting lighter than I expected. If you've stayed with this story, maybe you recognize parts of yourself in it. Maybe you've been the one who held everything together quietly. If so, know this keeping the peace should never cost you your place. I didn't fight for money. I fought for the right to exist without earning it, and that's what I kept.